Whispers of the Ancient Forest. Hey guys, tonight we begin with a very slow stroll, a gentle wander through a forest so old it's practically older than your phone, your bed, and probably your favorite brand of coffee combined. So dim the lights, sink into your chair, maybe even let your head roll a little to the side because we're gonna take it easy. No rush, no dramatic clashes of swords or thunderous proclamations of war, just trees, soil, and people who mostly messed up in quiet, rather tragic ways. Now, when I say ancient forest, I don't just mean the trees. I mean the people who walked under them, breathed their damp, mossy air, and, let's be honest, often did very stupid things because they had too much money, too little common sense, or a royal title that didn't come with instructions. And so our journey begins with whispers, the faint, rustling kind that travel from branch to branch, carrying tales of the long-forgotten past. Let's float over, quite gently, to a figure who was, of course, extremely serious about his appearance, mostly because he had no idea how tragic his genetic inheritance had already made him. I'm talking about Charles II of Spain. You've probably seen portraits of him, looking like someone had tried to sculpt a human out of a mashed potato and then added a crown for flair. Of course, he was called the Bewitched, which sounds fun until you realize the curse was mostly his Habsburg bloodline deciding to double down on itself, generation after generation. Charles was born in 1661, a time when Europe was bustling with wars, palace intrigue, and people inventing new ways to be miserable in powdered wigs. His parents were first cousins, because why not? And this habit, repeated for generations, made him, well, let's say, very special. His jaw jutted out so much he could barely chew, he struggled to speak properly, and he had the health of a particularly unlucky cabbage. And yet, despite being, in modern terms, a walking cautionary tale of inbreeding, he ruled Spain for 39 years, long enough to be very, very bored, and also to inspire some of the quietest sighs in European history. Now, Charles wasn't exactly the life of the party. He had the occasional, very brief moment of ruling competence, usually involving treaties that someone else had already written. But mostly, he was busy lying in bed, contemplating whether to speak or maybe just wave his hand because movement was exhausting. Imagine trying to run an empire when your body insists that even standing is a full-day activity. It's charming in a tragic sort of way. Floating gently along, let's peek at his court. It was crowded with ministers, advisors, and relatives, all politely ignoring the fact that their king looked like a cross between a dried prune and a particularly stubborn loaf of bread. They whispered endlessly about alliances, marriages, and the family tree, which, for the Habsburgs, was less a tree, more a tangled vine that occasionally bit someone on the jaw. And speaking of royal marriages, Charles's life was punctuated by the same sad theme that has visited many royal houses, attempting to secure the dynasty with, you guessed it, more Habsburg relatives. Each marriage came with the high hope of producing an heir who might survive infancy. Spoiler, not many did. You could almost imagine the royal doctors rolling their eyes as they delivered yet another child who looked like a miniature version of Charles, with all the charming Habsburg features that doctors of the time pretended were just quaint. So, while the forest outside whispered and the wind carried the scent of wet leaves and decaying moss, inside the palace, life was a slow, quiet disaster, full of delicate linens, fainting spells, and the constant soft hum of anxiety. Charles II didn't exactly plot wars or pen grand letters. He mostly existed, a testament to human endurance and to the curious ways dynasties sometimes work against their own survival. And if we wander a bit farther, past the labyrinth of corridors and the royal gardeners, we find the next figure in our forest of time, Maria Teresa of Spain, Charles's slightly more lively cousin and wife. She had her own hopes and quietly tragic health quirks. Her life was filled with careful steps, whispered negotiations, and the occasional resigned sigh when confronted with yet another political marriage suggestion. She carried on the family tradition, attempting to bring the next generation into the world, most of whom, unfortunately, were doomed to join Charles in the long, slow parade of illness and inbred awkwardness. The forest, of course, doesn't care about human misery, but it listens. It remembers. The trees, the moss, the slow trickle of water over roots all carry echoes of sighs and whispers from ages past. And in that whispering, we find a strange comfort, that these moments, these very human, quiet catastrophes, are part of a rhythm much larger than any one king or queen. So as we drift further into the cool shade of history, we see that the forest, the palace, and the people in between all tell a single story. A story of quiet suffering, gentle absurdity, and the very slow passage of time. Charles II and his contemporaries might have been trapped in layers of silk, powdered wigs, and bad genetics, but their lives remind us that history isn't always grand or loud. Sometimes it's just a whisper through the trees, inviting you to settle down, close your eyes, and drift along. And now, let's tiptoe to another corner of this forest, another life quietly unraveling under the weight of titles, expectations, and slightly cursed family trees. Our next figure is Louis XIV's lesser-known cousin, Philip I, Duke of Orleans, who lived under the long, tedious shadow of the Sun King himself. Philip was famous for many things, mostly for having the audacity to exist in a palace full of mirrors while trying not to faint at the grandeur of his brother's elaborate spectacles. He had a taste for elegance, drama, and occasionally a quiet rebellion against the monotony of royal protocol. Of course, Philip's life wasn't without the usual charm of aristocratic woes. He had children, misadventures, and moments of mild scandal that, if whispered through the forest, would sound like the faint rustle of leaves disturbed by a squirrel. His story, like Charles II's, reminds us that dynasties aren't about glory, more about a slow, ongoing series of awkward, tragicomic events. And as the forest stretches endlessly around us, we float from one whisper to another, from moss-covered branches to marble halls, from silent courtiers to quietly ailing monarchs. The narrative unfolds at the pace of a calm river, winding around rocks and fallen logs. It's slow, it's soft, and it's exactly how history sometimes wants to be remembered. So let your eyelids drift as we continue. We have centuries ahead, dozens of quietly tragic royals, and a forest full of secrets waiting to murmur their stories. And remember, in this gentle monologue, there's no rush, just history, slowly, softly, whispering you into the night. Gentle shadows of royal folly. As we settle further into our forest of time, let's float, ever so quietly, from the Spanish palaces to the French courts, where the air smelled of lavender, waxed floors, and occasionally despair. Yes, despair. It tends to linger around royalty like an uninvited guest, and in Philippe I's life, it took the form of endless comparisons to his older brother, Louis XIV, the Sun King, the very tall, very proud, very everything monarch whose shadow stretched across Europe like an immovable curtain. Philippe, of course, was not exactly the sun, more like a faint glimmer of moonlight bouncing off a gilded mirror. He had charm, intelligence, and a sharp wit, qualities that somehow translated mostly into quietly sighing at court functions. Imagine trying to enjoy your breakfast when every mirror in the palace seems to silently mock you. That was Philippe's daily routine. He married, had children, and tried not to faint when navigating the treacherous waters of court intrigue. And speaking of children, Philippe's offspring carried on the classic pattern, a mix of charm, unfortunate genetic quirks, and mild scandal. His sons would grow into positions of power, inevitably repeating the cycle of polite misery that seems to haunt aristocratic families. It's almost poetic in its consistency. You could say that Philippe's life, in essence, was an ongoing meditation on the subtle art of quietly surviving family expectations while maintaining just enough dignity to be allowed to sit at the same table as the Sun King. Meanwhile, the forest around us whispers of distant lands, drawing us slowly toward England, where another dynasty was quietly unraveling in a far less spectacular but equally tragic fashion. Let's meander over to the reign of George III, a king whose very name evokes images of powdered wigs, long, uncomfortable chairs, and occasional bouts of madness, as history politely calls them. George III was, by all accounts, a well-meaning monarch who deeply loved his family, country, and, oddly, agricultural reform. He spent hours poring over farm plots and crop yields, a pastime that would be quietly soothing, except for the fact that he also suffered from a recurrent mental illness that modern historians suspect was porphyria, which, in simple terms, meant his brain occasionally decided to play cruel little tricks on him. Now, you might imagine a king staggering about, shouting proclamations and waving royal scepters in panic. But George III's episodes were often far more subtle. Muttered conversations with invisible companions, a sudden preference for the color blue, or the inexplicable refusal to touch certain foods. His family, loyal as they were, learned to navigate these episodes with calm patience, quietly rearranging the furniture, whispering reassurances, and perhaps hoping that the king would soon forget whatever mild mischief his mind had conjured. It's worth noting that George's long reign, 60 years in fact, was marked not by constant chaos, but by a slow, gentle accumulation of small, quietly absurd events. Wars happened, treaties were signed, America did its thing, but in the royal household, life was a steady rhythm of awkward moments, polite sighs, and the occasional comedic miscommunication between monarch and ministers. The forest would have been proud of such gentle chaos. Floating eastward, we find ourselves in the dim corridors of Russian palaces, where Peter the Great had already left a trail of reforms, beards shaved, and nobles quietly sighing at new rules. But let's not rush to the flashy czars with grand ambitions. Instead, let's focus on the quieter, gentler tragedies, the lives of Peter's successors, like Ivan VI. Born into a palace already buzzing with intrigue, Ivan's life was a slow parade of confinement and disappointment. He was made emperor as a baby, a title that sounds impressive until you realize he spent almost all of his life imprisoned by people who claimed they were protecting him from ambition, which is a polite way of saying, let's quietly ignore this child forever. Imagine a baby in a gilded cage, lulled to sleep by the rustle of velvet curtains, the whisper of servants' footsteps, and the faint echo of a throne that he would never properly occupy. Ivan VI never ruled, never married, never really got to experience the courtly life he was born for. And yet somehow his story drifts through history like a soft sigh through the branches, a reminder that sometimes the crown isn't about power, it's about being gently, quietly forgotten. And as we drift further, the forest grows denser. Moss thickens on stone walls, shadows stretch long across palace floors, and our minds settle into the rhythm of centuries passing softly, without fuss. We meet more royals, some sickly, some spoiled, and all quietly human in their peculiar aristocratic ways. Take, for example, Princess Charlotte of Wales, whose short life was filled with expectation, careful politeness, and the gentle pressure of carrying on a dynasty that seemed determined to weigh her down like a velvet curtain. Charlotte was much anticipated, born in 1796 as the only legitimate child of the Prince Regent, later George IV. Her father, famous for indulgence, extravagance, and general awkwardness, seemed to have little clue on how to parent a child. Charlotte grew up under constant supervision, the subject of endless courtly chatter, and the bearer of hopes she could never fully fulfill. She married, she bore a child, and then, in a quiet, tragic twist, both mother and child passed away shortly after childbirth. The whispers of the forest seemed to sigh here, softly, without judgment, acknowledging yet another small, royal calamity. And from these corridors we can drift slowly back west to the German principalities, where similar quiet tragedies played out. Consider Ludwig II of Bavaria, sometimes called the fairy tale king. He spent his life building fantastical castles, wandering in forests, and composing music. On the surface, this seems whimsical and charming, but remember, he did all this while avoiding real political responsibility and quietly detaching from the world. In the ancient forest of history, he is the shadowy figure of escapism, a monarch who preferred marble turrets and echoing halls to councils, ministers, and the mundane pressures of rule. Ludwig's life ended mysteriously, a soft whisper in the water of Lake Starnberg, leaving behind castles that are still admired and a legacy that is more curious than tragic. His story fits perfectly into our journey. The forest absorbs it, carries it gently along, and reminds us that human folly and quiet genius often exist side by side, brushing past each other like leaves in a slow wind. And so, as we drift on, we notice a pattern. Royalty, for all their gold, titles, and pomp, often lived slow, awkward, and strangely melancholic lives. Illness, isolation, and family expectations were constants, gently shaping history in ways more subtle than the loud battles or grand proclamations that textbooks like to highlight. The forest, with its patient moss and whispering leaves, holds these stories delicately, offering us the calm rhythm of centuries, the soft sigh of a palace corridor, the faint shuffle of slippers on stone, and the slow passage of time marked by minor disasters, gentle regrets, and occasionally quiet beauty. And with that, we let our echoes drift just a little further. There are more corridors to wander, more whispers to hear, and more royals whose lives unfolded in the slow, mesmerizing cadence of duty, misfortune, and soft absurdity. The forest stretches endlessly, and so does our journey, carrying us ever deeper into the gentle, whispering past.
Echoes through marble halls. As the forest thickens, our path meanders from the damp, mossy corridors of Germany and England toward the slightly frostier palaces of Scandinavia. Here, history is quieter still, marked not by grand battles, but by the slow tick of aristocratic expectation and the faint, persistent sighs of people who, despite their titles, could not escape the peculiar weight of being important. Let's pause first with Christian VII of Denmark, a king remembered less for his reign and more for the gentle chaos his mind carried like a private storm cloud. Christian ascended the throne in 1766, a teenager with the usual mix of royal privilege and slightly alarming eccentricity. Modern historians suspect he suffered from severe mental illness, though contemporaries described it with the polite term eccentric behavior, which is historian speak for he did very odd things and everyone had to deal with it quietly. His life was largely a series of quiet disasters. His advisors ran the country while he wandered the halls, muttering to himself, occasionally scribbling nonsensical notes, and at one point reportedly thinking he could communicate with angels, or perhaps just trees. His wife, Caroline Matilda, navigated this maze with gentle patience, attempting to maintain dignity and occasionally fainting at the drama that inevitably surrounded him. It's a soft tragedy, wrapped in silk and whispered in court corridors. Now, drifting westward again, we find ourselves in the labyrinthine politics of the Austrian Habsburgs. And yes, before you ask, we are about to meet yet another inbred, sigh-prone royal. Maria Carolina of Austria, the youngest sister of Marie Antoinette, married into the kingdom of Naples and Sicily. Her life was a slow carousel of courtly intrigues, subtle rivalries, and the constant, polite management of people who wanted her to be charming, quiet, obedient, and politically astute all at the same time. Naturally, she managed this with a combination of determination and mild exasperation, producing children and maintaining her own sanity just enough to be considered competent. Maria Carolina's story is gently tragic in a very aristocratic way. She dealt with illness, untimely deaths, and the occasional scandal with the same grace that a swan uses to glide across water, all while the forest outside her palace whispered of time passing, leaves falling, and quiet inevitabilities. Life in these noble households was less a fiery drama and more a series of soft sighs, polite conversations, and the slow accumulation of small misfortunes. Speaking of accumulation, let's float across to Russia, where Catherine the Great had recently passed the crown into the hands of her son, Paul I. Paul, dear Paul, is a monarch whose story is a gentle lesson in parental overcompensation and mild paranoia. He spent his early life under the shadow of a dominant mother, constantly reminded of her brilliance, charm, and decisively better taste in wigs and furniture. As an adult, he ruled with caution and quiet obsessiveness, trying to assert himself while never quite escaping the echoes of Catherine's imposing personality. Paul's court was a place of soft tension. Ministers tiptoed through politics, courtiers whispered behind silken fans, and Paul spent a great deal of time worrying about conspiracies that may or may not have existed. He married Maria Feodorovna, a woman who was simultaneously devoted, endlessly patient, and slightly terrified of her husband's occasional quiet bursts of authoritarian energy. Their children, naturally, inherited a mixture of parental quirks, from excessive caution to dramatic sighing. And in the calm narrative of history, this family becomes another soft echo in our forest of time. Drifting south now, our path winds through Italy, where smaller duchies offered their own peculiar tragedies. Ferdinand, the first of the two Sicilies, for instance, spent a life gently avoiding responsibility, while enjoying lavish banquets and the occasional philosophical conversation about how best to ignore politics without anyone noticing. His courtiers whispered endlessly, not because there was scandal, though occasionally there was, but because whispering is the polite default in royal households. The forest would listen and nod at such careful mediocrity, letting it join the chorus of centuries quietly passing. Meanwhile, back in England, George IV, elder son of our previously mentioned George III, continued a tradition of leisurely indulgence. George IV was infamous for his vanity, his extravagance, and his quiet inability to make responsible decisions. Portraits show him resplendent in gilded attire, lounging as though the entire kingdom existed solely to provide a comfortable backdrop for his silk robes. And in a sense, it did. His reign was less about governance and more about the slow accumulation of debts, elegant parties, and the occasional awkward moment when the Queen or Parliament politely suggested he perhaps consider matters of state. Let's pause for a moment to breathe. Imagine the echoing halls, the slow shuffle of slippers, the soft rustle of silk gowns, the faint tick of distant clocks. This is the rhythm of history, the heartbeat of aristocracy, moving gently past human ambition, vanity, and misfortune. It's not exciting, not shocking, not particularly inspiring, but it's steady, calm, and oddly comforting, like a lullaby written in marble corridors. And now, drifting ever so quietly to the east again, we meet the Japanese court during the Edo period. Here, the shoguns ruled with quiet authority, their lives a blend of rigid ceremony and subtle personal idiosyncrasies. Take Tokugawa Ienari, who ruled for 50 years. He is notable not for battles or reforms, but for living very comfortably, enjoying the arts and fathering a prodigious number of children. His life was largely uneventful in terms of political turmoil, which is, in our whispering forest metaphor, the equivalent of a soft breeze gently moving leaves without ever toppling a branch. Even the occasional scandal, mostly involving minor courtly intrigue, passed like mist through the palace gardens. Ienami's existence demonstrates the quiet, persistent hum of routine aristocracy. Lots of paperwork, polite social gatherings, and the gentle propagation of lineage with very few loud outbursts. So, as our journey continues through the forest of time, we notice a pattern emerging. Across Europe, Asia, and scattered corners of the world, royal lives unfold in soft, repetitive rhythms. Illness, inbreeding, minor scandals, polite intrigue, gentle vanity, and quiet eccentricity form the slow, steady heartbeat of history. Loud battles and dramatic revolutions are only fleeting spikes in a sea of whispers. And the forest, ever patient, absorbs it all, carrying tales of soft tragedy, quiet absurdity, and gentle human folly, from generation to generation. As our eyelids drift a little further, we prepare to meet even more figures whose lives were governed not by grand achievements, but by the slow accumulation of small, quietly amusing disasters. Each sigh, each whisper, each awkward family dinner is preserved, carried along in the soft rustling of leaves until it becomes part of the enduring, gentle symphony of history. And so we continue, deeper into the forest, past marble halls, velvet curtains, and moss-covered courtyards. Our journey is slow, rhythmic, and unhurried. The whispers of the past float gently around us, reminding us that history, in its quietest moments, is far more mesmerizing than any dramatic climax ever could be.
Velvet curtains and whispered secrets. As we float deeper into the forest of history, imagine the soft rustle of leaves above, mingling with the gentle echoes of marble halls, velvet curtains, and the faint creak of palace doors. This is the tempo of royal life, measured, deliberate, and occasionally absurd. Let's pause at the French court again, where the Bourbon dynasty continues to quietly entertain us with its mixture of elegance, vanity, and low-level chaos. We begin with Louis XV, sometimes called Louis the Well-Beloved, though anyone familiar with history might pause politely at the nickname. Louis XV was, by contemporary accounts, a gentleman who loved comfort, beauty, and, unsurprisingly, mistresses, lots of them. His reign was long, over 50 years, providing ample time for boredom, quiet scandal, and a succession of awkward family situations. Louis XV was not what you'd call a dynamic ruler. He preferred elaborate gardens, long walks, and conversations that meandered like a lazy river. He occasionally made decisions about France, mostly by deferring to ministers, and spent the rest of his life navigating the subtle art of existing as the center of attention without being burdened by responsibility. Naturally, this led to whispers in the corridors, mostly about his choices of companions and the endless polite sighs of those who had to manage the realm while he practiced what one might call leisure governance. Now, gently shifting focus, let's drift to his descendants. Louis XVI, of course, is well known for his unfortunate timing, coming to the throne just before revolutionary France decided it had enough of kings. But let's step slowly into his personal quirks, which are less often highlighted. Louis XVI had a soft voice, a shy demeanor, and the peculiar habit of getting lost in his own palace. He liked clocks, hats, and assembling locks, small fascinations that made him seem oddly human in a court dominated by pomp and ceremony. His queen, Marie Antoinette, is famous for the "let them eat cake" anecdote, which, as historians quietly note, she probably never actually said. Still, she was emblematic of courtly life, fashion-obsessed, often misunderstood, and perpetually under observation. Her every move catalogued by servants, ministers, and gossiping courtiers. The forest outside, if it could speak, would probably sigh at their struggles, navigating the weight of titles, surviving palace intrigue, and dealing with personal eccentricities that seem exaggerated only because history magnifies them. The branches rustle, the moss listens, and the faint echoes of distant footsteps remind us that royal life is often about endurance rather than drama. Floating eastward, let's consider Poland, where the elective monarchy created its own peculiar rhythm of quiet absurdity. Stanislaw August Poniatowski, the last king of Poland, tried to modernize his country, sponsor the arts, and gently reform politics, all while being subtly manipulated by powerful neighbors. His reign, though earnest, was a slow waltz of compromises, failed reforms, and whispered negotiations. The forest outside, if it could speak, would note that even in attempts at greatness, human frailty drifts quietly alongside ambition. Meanwhile, across the Channel, in Britain, Queen Victoria begins her long, measured reign. While her later years are often remembered for stern portraits and strict rules, her youth was surprisingly lively, full of letters, books, and gentle rebellions against protocol. Victoria had a deep affection for her husband, Prince Albert, whose death left her in extended mourning. Yet even in grief, the subtle comedy of court life persisted. Endless etiquette, peculiar hobbies, and quiet observations about which cousin had misbehaved or which diplomat failed to bow correctly. As we drift further into the 19th century, the pattern remains consistent. Royals are a mixture of extraordinary privilege and slow-moving tragedy. They are human, despite the layers of velvet, powdered wigs, and gold leaf. Their mistakes are mostly quiet, their follies largely invisible to the wider world, and yet when viewed through the lens of history, they form a gentle symphony of absurdity, frailty, and endurance. Returning briefly to Germany, Ludwig I of Bavaria offers another gentle anecdote. He loved art, literature, and romantic ideals, but often at the cost of ignoring political realities. His court was a gallery of eccentricities, poets, painters, and philosophers coexisting with the steady flow of minor scandals and familial complaints. The forest outside, if it had ears, would note that how the slow passing of time seemed to swallow all ambitions into quiet contemplation. Meanwhile, Italy's smaller states continued the trend. Ferdinand II of the Two Sicilies ruled cautiously, avoided unnecessary drama, and maintained an air of quiet competence. But even in his careful governance, the tiniest whisper of intrigue, a disgruntled minister, a quietly ambitious cousin, could ripple softly through the marble halls. In essence, the forest of history records not only dramatic upheavals, but also the soft patter of small, everyday royal calamities. And so, as we drift through these centuries, a soothing rhythm emerges. Illness, eccentricity, inbreeding, quiet scandals, and the relentless pressures of aristocratic expectation. These are the gentle currents that carry our historical forest forward. No loud battles, no sudden uprisings, just the measured, hypnotic passage of time cushioned by moss, marble, and velvet curtains. Let's pause here, just long enough to breathe. The forest is still. The leaves whisper softly. Our journey through time has introduced kings and queens whose lives were not grandiose in the usual sense, but mesmerizing in their quiet complexity. Every sigh, every faint misstep, every peculiar hobby adds to the calm hum of centuries gently passing. And now, as your eyes grow heavier, and the forest around us continues its soft murmur, we prepare to meet even more figures whose lives gently sway between absurdity and quiet tragedy. The branches above bend slowly in the wind, guiding us forward, deeper into this endless tapestry of whispered history.
Faint sighs behind gilded doors. As the forest of history stretches onward, imagine the faint hum of distant fountains, the soft shuffle of slippers across marble floors, and the ever-present whisper of leaves outside palace windows. Here, life moves at a patient, unhurried pace, and the royals we meet are less about sweeping conquests and more about quiet human frailty, eccentric habits, and slightly awkward family interactions. Let's pause in Russia once more, at the court of Alexander I. Alexander was an interesting mixture of intellect, charm, and occasional melancholy. He ruled during the early 19th century, a time when Europe had been shaken by the Napoleonic Wars, yet his personal life remained relatively undramatic in the public sense. Behind closed doors, Alexander wrestled with religion, philosophy, and the occasional existential sigh. He loved long walks in the palace gardens, thoughtful conversations with his advisors, and sometimes simply staring at the ceiling, contemplating the mysteries of life, or perhaps wondering if his hairstyle was sufficiently majestic. Alexander married Elizabeth Alexeyevna, a woman quietly enduring life in a foreign court. Their relationship, like much in aristocratic life, was a mixture of affection, duty, and polite sighs at each other's quirks. Elizabeth had her own eccentricities, a fondness for poetry, delicate health, and the subtle art of surviving a husband whose moods could shift as quietly as the wind moving through the ancient trees. And while Alexander's reign is often discussed in terms of alliances, treaties, and military campaigns, the personal side, the soft, intimate, sometimes absurd realities of royal life remains largely unremarked. Imagine him quietly sipping tea, listening to the whisper of servants, and pondering whether the day's state papers were more tedious than usual. This is the kind of calm, slow-moving history that the forest remembers best. Not the battles, but the quiet interiority of those who wore crowns. Drifting gently westward, we come to Spain once more, to Ferdinand VII, a king whose life is marked by gentle contradiction. He was charming, stubborn, and occasionally petulant, traits that manifested quietly in his long reign. He loved hunting, decorating palaces, and occasionally sulking in ways that could have been mistaken for profound political insight by an inattentive observer. He married multiple times, producing heirs who carried on the family pattern: polite misfortune, delicate health, and a slight tendency toward melancholic sighs. The forest, if it could speak, might comment on how history's quiet tragedies are often hidden behind elaborate wardrobes and polished floors. Ferdinand's personal struggles, though small on the scale of world events, are mesmerizing in their human subtlety. A king who could wield armies, but struggled with simple domestic decisions, quietly navigating the soft catastrophes of family, duty, and courtly expectation. Moving north, we drift toward Prussia, where Frederick William III quietly continued his dynastic responsibilities. Frederick William was cautious, methodical, and rather unexciting by the standards of dramatic history. Yet his life, filled with careful diplomacy, subdued family disputes, and the soft echo of ceremonial steps through palace halls, exemplifies the hypnotic rhythm of slow aristocratic existence. He married Louise Mecklenburg-Strelitz, whose intelligence, charm, and subtle patience allowed her to endure both court politics and the occasional royal sulk with grace. Their lives are reminders that much of history's real texture lies not in explosions or revolutions, but in the quiet, patient handling of mundane obligations and tiny personal crises. And as we float westward again, the English royal family continues its slow, steady march through time. William IV, older brother to Queen Victoria, lived a life punctuated by quiet eccentricities and mild scandal. He had a fondness for the navy, horses, and private theatrics that amused courtiers but rarely made it into the grand historical narrative. His personal charm and peculiarities were soft ripples in the calm pond of monarchy, affecting family and court in ways subtle enough that only a careful listener, like our forest, could detect them. Returning briefly to France, we find Louis XVIII, a monarch whose life was largely defined by survival. Having endured exile during the French Revolution and Napoleonic upheavals, he returned to the throne in a quieter, less dramatic era. His reign was mostly about restoring stability, arranging polite ceremonies, and occasionally sighing at the absurdities of court etiquette. Louis XVIII's story reminds us that even when history is turbulent, the lived experience of its figures often unfolds in measured, subdued rhythms, rather than loud, sweeping gestures. And finally, let's drift back to the German states, where Wilhelm I, later German emperor, quietly navigated a lifetime of dynastic responsibility. Wilhelm was patient, observant, and deeply aware of the expectations placed upon him. He married Augusta of Saxe-Weimar, whose calm demeanor and subtle intelligence helped smooth the daily intricacies of court life. Their children continued the long tradition of aristocratic peculiarities, gentle vanity, careful attention to protocol, and, of course, the occasional minor scandal whispered behind closed doors. As we settle into this gentle rhythm, it becomes clear royalty across centuries and continents shares a common thread. Illness, eccentricity, mild scandal, careful observation, and the quiet struggle to meet expectations quietly shape lives that might otherwise seem glamorous. The forest, with its patient moss, winding paths, and soft sighing leaves, holds all this history delicately, letting us move through it at our own unhurried pace. And so, as your eyes grow heavier and the whispers of history mingle with the rustling of leaves above, we pause for a moment. We have wandered through palaces and forests, across centuries and countries, listening to the faint sighs, awkward habits, and gentle follies of those who wore crowns. The stories are soft, the rhythm slow, and the lessons subtle. Sometimes the most mesmerizing history is the history that moves quietly, patiently, like a gentle breeze through ancient trees.
Curtains, chandeliers, and quiet disasters. As we drift further into the forest of history, the branches above grow thicker, filtering dappled light onto moss-covered palace stones. Here, life is not marked by dramatic battles or roaring revolutions, but by subtle sighs, minor mishaps, and the gentle absurdities of royalty navigating wealth, duty, and occasionally bad luck. Let's pause in Austria again, where the Habsburg dynasty continues to demonstrate that inbreeding, high expectations, and soft tragedies make for a strangely hypnotic rhythm. Take Emperor Franz Joseph I, who ruled from 1848 to 1916, a reign so long it could lull you to sleep just hearing about it. Franz Joseph was serious, dutiful, and deeply attached to protocol, sometimes to the point of near obsession. He married Elizabeth of Bavaria, known to most simply as Sisi, a woman famous for her beauty, long hair, and restless spirit. Sisi spent much of her life traveling, exercising, and composing personal poetry, quietly rebelling against the suffocating ceremonial demands of court life. Her husband, meanwhile, spent long hours in palaces, shuffling papers, receiving diplomats, and occasionally sighing at the absurdity of existence. Their lives were a soft tapestry of contrasts, her freedom and melancholy, his rigidity and devotion. Their children naturally inherited a mixture of delicate health, aristocratic eccentricities, and a tendency to complicate the family tree with quiet tragedy. Franz Josef's reign is remembered less for scandal and more for the persistent, gentle hum of decades passing in patterned, almost hypnotic continuity. The forest, as always, listens and records without judgment. Floating westward again, we encounter Queen Isabella II of Spain, a monarch whose personal life is a symphony of awkwardness, scandal, and quiet misfortune. She ascended the throne as a child and spent much of her reign navigating political instability, familial interference, and her own delicate health. Isabella married her cousin, Francisco de Assis,
a man whose personality can politely be described as unremarkable. Their union produced heirs, but also court gossip, mild scandals, and the soft, continuous sigh of dynastic expectation pressing down upon them. Moving north to Scandinavia, Oscar II of Sweden offers another glimpse into the peculiar rhythm of royal life. He ruled with a calm, steady hand, enjoying intellectual pursuits, maritime interests, and the occasional quiet negotiation of courtly disputes. His family life, like that of many royals, was a delicate balance between private indulgences and public duty. Courtiers whispered, children grew up under careful supervision, and the forest outside his palace quietly absorbed the passage of decades. Meanwhile, in England, Queen Victoria's long widowhood continued to shape the monarchy in subtle ways. The Queen's children and grandchildren, often married to one another across European borders, carried the peculiar quirks and minor tragedies of inbreeding, a theme echoing through generations. Some children were robust, some delicate, some eccentric, and some tragically brief in their lives. And yet the rhythm persisted: polite duties, ceremonial pomp, occasional fainting spells, and letters filled with sighs and personal reflections. The forest, of course, does not judge these lives. Instead, it whispers back the stories of faintly scandalous affairs, peculiar personal habits, and quiet eccentricities. Consider Empress Elizabeth of Austria, Sisi once again, who was as private as she was restless, walking for miles in palace gardens, composing poetry, and carefully documenting her life in diaries. Her actions were less about rebellion and more about a subtle assertion of self within the rigid constraints of courtly expectation. Each of her footsteps echoed softly in history, like the whisper of leaves in a cool, shaded grove. Drifting to the Italian principalities, King Victor Emmanuel II of Sardinia and later Italy presided over a country in transition. His reign was marked by political consolidation, diplomatic maneuvering, and the occasional personal eccentricity. Yet in private, he navigated the slow rhythms of court life: polite meals, careful attention to family, and a steady accumulation of minor domestic dramas. His children, like so many before them, inherited the dual burden of privilege and expectation, their quiet tragedies and delicate peculiarities absorbed by history as gently as rain falling on forest moss. Even in Prussia, Wilhelm I continued to quietly observe, administer, and occasionally sigh at the intrigues of court and family. His life, though outwardly dignified, was shaped by minor personal quirks, subtle family tensions, and the relentless passage of time. His children and grandchildren continued the steady pattern of polite eccentricities, brief illnesses, and occasional moments of scandal, quietly contained within palace walls. As we drift through the corridors of Europe, a clear pattern emerges. Royalty, no matter the country, experiences life in measured, often hypnotic rhythms. Illness, eccentricity, minor scandal, strict etiquette, and the gentle pressure of expectation quietly shape their days. The forest above, with its whispering leaves and patient moss, observes the centuries unfolding with an unhurried patience, carrying these stories softly onward. And so, as the light dims outside the palace windows and the wind moves gently through ancient trees, we pause. Our journey has brought us through Austria, Spain, Sweden, England, Italy, and Prussia, across centuries and dynasties. We have seen minor scandals, quiet eccentricities, delicate health issues, and the slow, hypnotic rhythm of aristocratic life. The forest above sways gently, carrying our stories forward. Every sigh, Every whispered complaint, every delicate health concern becomes part of the forest's soft memory. And as you drift further into this calm historical rhythm, remember, it's the subtle, quiet moments, those almost imperceptible personal dramas that make history hypnotically mesmerizing, even if no one claps or shouts about them.
Whispered legacies and quiet palaces. As our journey continues, imagine the soft patter of footsteps along polished marble floors, the faint rustle of silk curtains, and the gentle creak of chandelier chains swinging ever so slightly in drafty palace halls. The rhythm of history is unhurried here, measured by sighs, private letters, and whispered secrets that, like leaves in a forest, are carried softly from one generation to the next. Let's pause in Germany, where Kaiser Wilhelm II, later Emperor of Germany, provides a fascinating example of quiet personal eccentricity amid dynastic expectation. Wilhelm II ascended the throne in 1888, a young man eager to leave a mark on the world. Outwardly confident, he was also prone to impulsive decisions, awkward speeches, and a fascinating mix of vanity and sensitivity. He suffered from a physical disability that affected his arm, which he often exaggerated for effect or perhaps simply to be noticed. Either way, it added a peculiar rhythm to his interactions at court. Wilhelm married Augusta Victoria, a woman whose calm, deliberate personality counterbalanced his sometimes theatrical tendencies. Their family life, like so many royal households, was a mixture of carefully orchestrated appearances, small personal dramas, and an endless parade of children, each inheriting a unique mix of traits from their dynastically entangled lineage. These personal quirks, slight illnesses, odd habits, mild eccentricities, reverberated quietly through history, echoing softly like the whispering leaves outside the palace windows. Drifting south again, we encounter Italy, where Umberto I's reign was relatively short but full of understated personal drama. Umberto, though outwardly dignified, had a tendency toward melancholy and contemplation. His wife, Margherita of Savoy, was deeply devoted, patient, and elegant, navigating both his moods and the slow rhythm of courtly life with quiet grace. Their son, Victor Emmanuel III, would inherit not only the crown, but also the weight of subtle familial expectations, health concerns, and courtly protocol. And in Spain, Alfonso XIII inherited his throne as a baby, which is a recurring theme in royal history, a child burdened with the responsibility of nationhood long before they could properly comprehend it. Alfonso's upbringing was carefully orchestrated, filled with tutors, advisors, and the polite expectation that he would grow into a competent monarch. Yet his personal life was dotted with eccentricities, quiet scandals, and minor family dramas that historians now recount with the gentle rhythm of a lullaby. In Russia, Nicholas II, the last Tsar, emerges quietly in this forest of history. Unlike the dramatic portrayals of revolutions and uprisings, Nicholas's personal life was filled with subtle awkwardness, genuine affection for his family, and the quietly tragic consequences of health issues inherited through generations of intermarriage. He married Alexandra Feodorovna, whose German upbringing and delicate constitution made her both deeply devoted and quietly anxious in the tumultuous environment of the imperial court. Their children, 4 daughters and a son, inherited delicate health and eccentric traits, adding yet another layer to the intricate, whispering web of dynastic life. The forest, patient and unjudging, seems to sigh here. It listens to the minor dramas of these families, the awkward miscommunications, the shy retreats from public life, the private fears and hopes carefully hidden behind velvet curtains. In this environment, quiet eccentricities are amplified. An obsession with a certain type of hat, a peculiar daily routine, a subtle habit of avoiding certain foods or conversations. These small quirks, repeated through generations, create a hypnotic rhythm that the forest remembers long after the people themselves have passed into shadow. Moving eastward once more, we encounter Japan during the Meiji and Taisho eras. Emperors like Meiji themselves lived lives of careful observation, embracing modernization while remaining confined by centuries of ceremonial expectation. Their personal lives were filled with gentle routines, poetry, calligraphy, observation of court etiquette, and endless correspondence. The contrast between public duties and private contemplation mirrors what we've observed in Europe. Life at the top is often less about grandeur and more about quietly maintaining a delicate balance between personal quirks and dynastic responsibility. Returning briefly to Britain, Edward VII emerges as a quietly entertaining character in this forest of history. He spent decades as the Prince of Wales, indulging in fashion, social events, and discreet affairs, while his mother, Queen Victoria, reigned with rigid formality. Edward's eventual ascent to the throne was marked by a gentle contrast, a king who was both charming and indulgent, whose personal habits and love of leisure occasionally puzzled ministers and courtiers, yet added a soft human dimension to a monarchy often perceived as austere. And now, drifting gently to Scandinavia, we meet Christian IX of Denmark, sometimes called the father-in-law of Europe, for his children's marriages into numerous royal families. His life was a careful orchestration of dynastic strategy, quiet personal eccentricities, and minor family tensions, all observed with calm patience by those around him. Even seemingly mundane events, letters between siblings, ceremonial protocols, subtle disagreements become hypnotic patterns in the forest's soft memory. As the branches above sway gently and the moss beneath cushions every footstep, we recognize a rhythm that has persisted across centuries. Subtle eccentricities, mild tragedies, careful management of appearances, and the gentle pressure of dynastic expectation. No loud explosions, no dramatic proclamations, just soft sighs, polite missteps, and minor scandals carried forward in the whispering corridors of time. So, as your eyes grow heavier and the forest seems to fold around you, remember, history is not always about the battles or the revolutions. Sometimes it is about the subtle, gentle moments, minor misadventures, delicate health concerns, and the quiet, patient endurance of those born to privilege. These whispers, like the rustling leaves above, are what make history hypnotically mesmerizing.
Tea, trains, and tiny catastrophes. As our journey continues, imagine the soft clink of china teacups, the faint creak of train carriages, and the quiet rustle of curtains in stately homes. The forest around us remains patient, recording not the loud battles of history, but the gentle rhythms of aristocratic life, personal quirks, minor mishaps, and subtle tragedies that unfold quietly behind gilded doors. Let's pause in Russia again, where the Romanovs, as always, offer a hypnotic mixture of privilege, eccentricity, and delicate human fragility. Nicholas II and Alexandra, as we've seen, lived lives punctuated by gentle anxiety, private devotion, and the consequences of generations of intermarriage. Their children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei, exemplify the small, quietly tragic dramas of royal life. Alexei, heir to the throne, suffered from hemophilia, a condition that required constant attention, careful management, and endless anxiety. The parents' devotion was profound, their worry constant, and the atmosphere of the palace quietly tense, though outwardly it remained elegant and ceremonious. Meanwhile, in England, Edward VII had passed, leaving George V to ascend the throne. George was a careful man, slightly reserved, and immensely aware of the pressures of duty. He married Mary of Teck, whose stoic patience and subtle sense of humor allowed her to navigate both her husband's personality and the complexities of royal protocol. Their children, Edward, Albert, Mary, and George, continued the rhythm of aristocratic eccentricity, minor illnesses, personal quirks, and the occasional polite misstep that could reverberate quietly through courtly society. Across Europe, Wilhelm II of Germany continued his subtle theatricality. Though outwardly commanding, Wilhelm's court was filled with the soft rhythm of eccentricities, awkward speeches, personal obsessions, and the gentle anxiety of living under public scrutiny. Even in moments that seem dramatic from afar, the underlying current is often quiet human concern. Will my arm look strange in this portrait? Or did I offend the ambassador with my tone? Small worries amplified by centuries of ceremonial expectation. In Italy, Victor Emmanuel III quietly ruled through decades of political upheaval while privately contending with family matters and minor health concerns. His careful attention to protocol, personal habits, and the subtleties of dynastic politics demonstrate the hypnotic persistence of royal life. The forest outside seems to nod approvingly, its mossy branches recording every small sigh and minor catastrophe with patient precision. Meanwhile, Spain's Alfonso XIII navigated a complicated mix of personal indulgences and public duty. He enjoyed social events, travel, and quiet amusements, yet was perpetually aware of his obligations as king. The forest's whispers carry the faint echoes of his private life, letters, consultations with ministers, and family concerns, all blending into the soft rhythm of aristocratic existence. Drifting northward again, Christian X of Denmark and Håkon VII of Norway presided over their respective kingdoms during times of subtle tension and quiet adaptation. Their personal lives were filled with the steady rhythm of courtly responsibility, ceremonial events, careful attention to heirs, and the occasional personal indulgence or mild eccentricity. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just the gentle, hypnotic pattern of history passing slowly, like a breeze through the leaves of our forest. And let's not forget Japan, where Emperor Taisho, often overshadowed by the later Showa era, navigated a court shaped by both centuries of tradition and the subtle pressures of modernization. Taisho's personal health challenges, partially due to inherited conditions, meant that much of governance required patient management, delegation, and quiet contemplation. His life, though outwardly ceremonial, carried the soft tension of human vulnerability beneath imperial robes. In Britain, George V's household continued to embody the hypnotic rhythm of aristocracy. Minor personal dramas, careful attention to protocol, and the constant passage of time marked by ceremonies and the slow growth of heirs. His children, Edward, Albert, later George VI, Mary, Henry, and George, each carried quirks, delicate health issues, and the subtle burdens of expectation. These are not stories of loud scandal or revolution, but gentle, quietly mesmerizing human narratives unfolding behind polished doors and soft velvet curtains. As we drift further, it becomes clear that royalty across continents shares a common pattern: private quirks, subtle tragedies, minor health concerns, and the endless rhythm of expectation. From hemophiliac heirs to socially awkward monarchs, from perfectly coiffed ladies of the court to kings with peculiar habits, the forest carries these whispers gently forward. It remembers every sigh, every faint misstep, every quiet rebellion against centuries of ritualized life. And so, as the branches above sway slowly in the breeze, and the moss beneath cushions our footsteps, we pause again. Our journey has meandered through Europe, Russia, and Japan, across decades filled with minor calamities, quiet eccentricities, and hypnotic repetitions of aristocratic life. It is a rhythm not marked by drama or violence, but subtlety, patience, and the faint, irresistible allure of observing humanity at its most private. The forest holds these stories, patiently whispering them into our consciousness as we drift ever deeper into history's quiet, mesmerizing cadence. Every minor scandal, faint sigh, and peculiar habit becomes part of a soft symphony, a lullaby of human folly, privilege, and endurance.
Silent sighs of the modern thrones. As the forest of history stretches on, imagine the faint hum of electric lights replacing candle glow, the soft shuffle of shoes along polished floors, and the gentle rustle of modern curtains. Though the centuries advance and technology shifts, the rhythm of royal life remains hypnotically similar. Personal quirks, minor scandals, and quiet eccentricities wrapped in endless protocol and expectation. Let's pause first in Britain, where George VI quietly navigated the monarchy through the turbulence of the early 20th century. Though thrust into the role unexpectedly after his brother Edward VIII's dramatic abdication, George approached his duty with a combination of quiet determination and personal vulnerability. He struggled with a speech impediment, a subtle but persistent challenge that required daily effort, patience, and, at times, considerable embarrassment. Yet, through the haze of anxiety and public expectation, he maintained dignity and provided a steadying influence for his family and nation. His wife, Elizabeth, later known as the Queen Mother, had a calming presence, balancing her husband's anxieties with gentle humor and deep familial devotion. Together, they created a household where private worries, some amplified by public scrutiny, were managed with quiet care. Their children, Elizabeth II among them, inherited the steady rhythm of duty, minor personal quirks, and the subtle pressures of continuity that would define the modern monarchy. Across the continent, in Spain, Alfonso XIII's descendants continue the pattern of gentle eccentricity, minor scandals, and careful attention to protocol. Juan Carlos I, though decades later, would inherit this subtle legacy, balancing public expectation with private interests, navigating familial pressures, and occasionally indulging in quietly humorous personal quirks, all while the forest of history observed with patient, mossy silence. Meanwhile, in Belgium, the line of Leopold kings maintained their calm, carefully measured pace of aristocratic life. Leopold III, with his awkward manners and quiet personal eccentricities, managed private anxieties alongside public duty, leaving historians to ponder the intricate dance between personal preference and dynastic expectation. His children, in turn, continued the rhythm. Delicate health, subtle quirks, and the occasional minor scandal whispered through palace corridors. Returning east, the Japanese imperial family navigated the rapidly changing world of the 20th century with the same quiet patience that had defined centuries of tradition. Emperor Hirohito, known in personal circles for his meticulous routines and calm demeanor, experienced the subtle tensions of being both a symbolic and political figure. His private life, punctuated by interests in marine biology and gentle personal rituals, contrast with the outward perception of formality and authority. Even as history marched forward in technological leaps, the hypnotic rhythm of quiet, personal routine persisted. In Scandinavia, monarchs like Gustav V of Sweden maintained their unhurried pace of ceremonial duty with subtle personal quirks. Gustav enjoyed sports, private correspondence, and carefully orchestrated family life. His children inherited both his eccentricities and the quiet weight of expectation. Norway's Håkon VII similarly balanced the slow rhythm of duty with personal interests, showing that across nations, aristocracy often shares a gentle pattern. Measured habits, minor human failings, and quiet perseverance through decades of public life. And meanwhile, in Monaco, Prince Rainier III and Princess Grace maintained a delicate balance of public charm and private eccentricity. Rainier's carefully managed schedule, personal interests, and occasional familial quarrels reflect the soft, recurring motif of aristocracy. Even in glamorous locales, subtle anxieties and minor domestic misadventures quietly shape existence. Princess Grace, meanwhile, blended public grace with private introspection, creating an elegant rhythm in the palace's daily life. And in Luxembourg, the Grand Dukes navigated minor personal dramas alongside ceremonial duties, maintaining calm households and quietly fascinating patterns of inherited habits and familial expectation. In each case, the forest of history records not the dramatic clashes, but the subtle patterns, minor eccentricities, delicate health issues, and small private calamities quietly passed down through generations. As we drift through this modern era, the forest whispers its observations. Though times change, technology evolves, and political structures shift, the rhythm remains. Aristocrats and monarchs live lives of quiet repetition, measured responsibility, and occasional personal quirks amplified by the gaze of history. The moss listens, the branches sway, and every sigh, minor misstep, and delicate eccentricity becomes part of a hypnotic pattern that stretches across centuries. And now, as your eyelids grow heavier and the forest of time surrounds us, we pause for a moment. History's hypnotic power lies not in battles, revolutions, or sensational headlines, but in these subtle, continuous rhythms, the whispered anxieties, the quiet scandals, and the gentle endurance of human eccentricity. Each palace corridor, each moss-covered branch carries these stories softly onward, allowing us to drift along with them.
Velvet halls and quiet modernities. As the forest of history grows denser and the centuries approach the present, imagine the soft hum of modern life. Quiet automobiles gliding past palace gates, distant murmurs of city traffic mingling with the faint rustle of leaves, and the gentle click of cameras capturing moments meant to appear casual yet perfectly staged. Even as society moves faster, the subtle rhythms of aristocratic life persist, slightly eccentric, mildly anxious, and endlessly meticulous. Let's begin in Britain, where Elizabeth II's reign provides a hypnotic study in calm continuity. Ascending the throne in 1952, she immediately assumed a life of careful protocol, public duty, and quiet, private reflection. Her days were filled with audiences, meetings, ceremonial visits, and the slow passage of time, marked by countless engagements. Behind the scenes, however, the story is softer, more nuanced. Private conversations with family, letters to distant relatives, and the gentle management of a sprawling household. The Queen's family exemplifies this quiet complexity. Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, brought his own peculiar rhythm to palace life, a love of ships, mechanical gadgets, and dry humor that occasionally elicited gentle sighs from courtiers. Their children, Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward, each inherited a blend of personal quirks, subtle anxieties, and the faint weight of dynastic expectation. Minor scandals, quiet rebellions, and awkward family dinners all form part of the hypnotic background of daily palace life. Across Europe, similar patterns persisted. In Spain, Juan Carlos I inherited both crown and delicate family quirks, navigating a monarchy restored in the 1970s with calm authority. His personal eccentricities, discreet indulgences, and occasional lapses of decorum were absorbed quietly by history, forming a soft, continuous rhythm rather than loud disruption.
His son, Felipe VI, continues this pattern, blending measured duty with private interests and the occasional whispered family misadventure. In Scandinavia, monarchs like Carl XVI Gustav of Sweden and Margaret II of Denmark exemplify the modern continuity of subtle aristocratic quirks. Carl enjoys skiing, motor racing, and personal hobbies that appear both peculiar and endearing. Margaret, with her artistic pursuits and intellectual curiosity, navigates the subtle intricacies of protocol while quietly indulging in creative expression. These modern royals, though often photographed and publicized, maintain the soft, hypnotic rhythms of aristocratic life. Minor personal eccentricities, careful management of family, and a gentle persistence through decades of public duty. Meanwhile, Monaco's royal family continues the pattern of private fascination behind public charm. Prince Albert II, like his father Rainier III before him, blends ceremonial duty with personal interests, charitable work, and private quirks quietly observed by the press and the forest alike. Princess Charlene, too, carries her own subtleties, navigating public appearances, family expectations, and private contemplations that are as timeless as the palace corridors themselves. Even in smaller monarchies, such as Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, and Jordan, a similar rhythm persists. Measured duty, minor eccentricities, quiet domestic concerns, and subtle family tensions. The pattern is hypnotic. Minor health worries, small miscommunications, gentle rivalries, and the faint sighs of those living lives observed by the public yet privately governed by ordinary human emotions. Across all continents, the pattern is clear. Modern royals live within structured routines, balancing ceremonial appearances with private lives that carry forward centuries of tradition. They endure subtle anxieties, minor scandals, and the persistent pressure to appear both perfect and human simultaneously. Yet, in all this, the forest listens, records, and carries these whispers through time, reminding us that even in the age of modernity, the hypnotic rhythm of history is unchanged. And now, as we drift further into the present, the branches above sway gently in the breeze, the leaves whisper softly, and the moss beneath cushions our path. History's subtle hypnotic power is revealed not in explosions, proclamations, or revolutions, but in the quiet persistence of human peculiarities, eccentricities, minor tragedies, polite anxieties, and the endless gentle repetition of daily life within gilded halls. This forest of centuries, from the ancient palaces of Europe to the modern residences of today, holds every sigh, every whispered misstep, every minor scandal, and every delicate personal quirk. And as you continue to drift along, notice how the hypnotic rhythm of history moves, gentle, measured, and endlessly captivating in its quiet persistence.
Tea sets, tiaras, and timeless eccentricities. As the forest of history continues to envelop us, imagine the soft hum of palace life in the 21st century, quiet conversations over tea, the rustle of carefully arranged documents, and the occasional whisper of cameras capturing the daily rhythm of royals who are at once public figures and private humans. The patterns of aristocracy, eccentricities, subtle anxieties, and delicate habits persist, gently hypnotic and soothing in their repetition. Let's pause in Britain once more. Queen Elizabeth II, until very recently, embodied centuries of this slow, mesmerizing rhythm. Her long life was punctuated not by dramatic rebellions or loud scandals, but by the quiet, patient management of family, duty, and public perception. Her relationship with Prince Philip exemplified this gentle interplay. Occasional dry humor, subtle disagreements, and decades of shared rituals and routines. The Duke of Edinburgh's fondness for ships, gadgets, and faintly awkward jokes created a rhythm that was both endearing and hypnotic. The next generation, from Charles to William and Harry, continues this pattern in ways slightly more public, yet still deeply human. Charles, with his environmental advocacy and sometimes idiosyncratic speech patterns, navigates the fine line between eccentricity and duty. William, steady and composed, blends personal interests with ceremonial expectation, while Harry, a little more restless, reminds us that even centuries of protocol cannot completely suppress individual quirks. Minor family disagreements, private anxieties, and whispered controversies continue the centuries-long pattern of subtle human drama. Across the continent, Spain's Felipe VI and Letizia maintain a similarly measured rhythm. Felipe quietly balances ceremonial duty with personal interests, while Letizia navigates media scrutiny, family pressures, and her own intellectual pursuits. Even the faintest hint of a domestic quarrel, a minor health concern, or awkward public photo becomes part of the hypnotic rhythm of monarchy, recorded by the forest of history as gently as raindrops falling on moss. In Scandinavia, King Carl Gustaf XVI of Sweden continues his decades-long reign with a mixture of eccentric hobbies, family obligations, and ceremonial responsibilities. His fascination with automobiles, sailing, and private theatrics is quietly mirrored by Queen Sylvia's own subtle routines and family management. Their children, Victoria, Carl Philip, and Madeline, carry forward the pattern of minor personal quirks, careful public presentation, and private anxieties that blend seamlessly into the hypnotic flow of palace life. Meanwhile, the Netherlands royal family offers another soft example. King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima navigate the subtle intricacies of modern monarchy, balancing ceremonial duties, private passions, and family life under public scrutiny. Their children inherit not only privileges, but also the gentle pressures and minor eccentricities that seem to recur in every generation of aristocracy. Even smaller monarchies, such as Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg, maintain these slow, hypnotic patterns. Prince Albert II of Monaco continues to balance public duties with personal interests, while his extended family quietly navigates both media attention and private eccentricities. In Luxembourg, Grand Duke Henri blends ceremonial responsibility with hobbies, quiet domesticity, and minor personal quirks, echoing the centuries-old rhythm of aristocratic life. The pattern becomes hypnotic. Subtle personal quirks, minor scandals, delicate health concerns, and polite anxieties repeated over generations. Royals across centuries and continents move through their lives with a mixture of public duty and private eccentricity, creating a soft, continuous melody that the forest of history records patiently. Each sigh, misstep, or faintly humorous quirk contributes to this enduring rhythm. And so, as the branches sway gently above and the moss cushions our passage, notice how the quiet, measured repetition of aristocratic life remains captivating. No loud battles, no dramatic upheavals, just centuries of minor misadventures, soft scandals, private anxieties, and the gentle endurance of human peculiarities. This is the hypnotic rhythm of history, carried forward by whispered stories and the patient memory of the forest.
Quiet modern thrones and subtle oddities. As we move further into the 21st century, the forest of history gently embraces the soft hum of modern palace life. Imagine faint phone notifications blending with the rustle of curtains, muted car engines outside palace gates, and the distant murmur of the media, always observing, always whispering, yet unable to disrupt the hypnotic rhythm of aristocratic existence. Here, minor eccentricities, subtle anxieties, and delicate personal quirks continue to define the lives of those born to privilege. Let's pause again in Britain, where the younger royals maintain centuries-old patterns in slightly modernized forms. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, navigate ceremonial duties with calm efficiency, yet their private lives are sprinkled with gentle eccentricities. William's love for helicopters, Catherine's quiet dedication to hobbies like photography and art, and the family's collective tendency toward mildly humorous missteps during public appearances. These small human details, often amplified by cameras, quietly echo the centuries-old rhythm of aristocratic life. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, offer a slightly different tempo. Their story includes subtle departures from tradition, personal struggles under the public gaze, and a conscious effort to balance private life with ceremonial expectation. Even in their more modern, media-driven choices, the pattern persists. Minor anxieties, private eccentricities, and soft whispered familial tension, all contributing to the hypnotic flow of modern monarchy. Across Europe, Spain's Felipe VI and Queen Letizia continue to blend duty and personal interest. Felipe quietly manages ceremonial obligations while indulging in sports and occasional hobbies, whereas Letizia navigates public scrutiny, familial expectation, and the soft challenges of adapting centuries-old protocol to the modern era. Even subtle health concerns, private disagreements, and the faintly awkward rhythms of daily life contribute to a gentle, mesmerizing cadence that the forest of history quietly records. In Scandinavia, the pattern continues. King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden and Queen Sylvia balance ceremonial duties, personal passions, and family life, each quietly managing their own eccentricities. Their children, Crown Princess Victoria, Prince Carl Philip, and Princess Madeleine, inherit these patterns, blending subtle quirks, ceremonial training, and private anxieties into the hypnotic rhythm of palace life. Minor incidents, small public faux pas, and gentle personal preferences ripple softly through history like a slow-moving stream. The Netherlands royal family similarly exemplifies this hypnotic pattern. King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima carefully navigate public duties while indulging in personal hobbies and quietly managing their family. Their children inherit both the privileges and subtle pressures of tradition, adding minor eccentricities and private concerns to the continuous thread of aristocratic rhythm. Even smaller monarchies such as Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg maintain these quietly mesmerizing dynamics. Prince Albert II of Monaco balances ceremonial duty with personal passions, while family members quietly navigate media attention, minor controversies, and the endless, gentle demands of royal expectation. In Luxembourg, Grand Duke Henri and his family quietly continue centuries of measured routines, minor eccentricities, and polite anxieties that blend seamlessly into the hypnotic cadence of aristocratic life. As the forest listens, it seems to sigh, acknowledging that even in the modern world, centuries-old patterns endure. Minor scandals, quiet family tensions, delicate health concerns, and eccentric personal habits quietly repeat, linking generations across continents. The rhythm is soothing, almost meditative. Subtle human failings, careful management of appearances, and gentle persistence in daily routines create a hypnotic lullaby of history.
And so, as you feel the moss beneath your feet and the branches above sway in soft unison, notice the enduring pattern. From ancient palaces to modern estates, from powdered wigs to contemporary suits, the hypnotic cadence of aristocracy persists. Every sigh, every minor misstep, every quiet eccentricity becomes part of a continuous, mesmerizing rhythm, history's soft whisper echoing through time.
Quiet coronations and gentle curiosities. As the forest of history stretches ever onward, imagine the soft ticking of clocks in stately rooms, the quiet shuffle of slippers across polished floors, and the gentle swish of ceremonial robes as modern royals carry out their duties. Despite the acceleration of the outside world, the hypnotic rhythm of aristocratic life remains. Subtle eccentricities, minor anxieties, and delicate quirks persist, softly threading through the lives of the privileged. Let's begin in Britain, where King Charles III now carries forward centuries of tradition. Charles, long prepared for the throne, balances personal passions, gardening, architecture, and environmental advocacy with the ongoing expectations of monarchy. His private letters, small habits, and understated moments of humor offer glimpses into the same subtle patterns that have repeated across generations. Minor quirks, domestic negotiations, and gentle anxieties carefully hidden behind public composure. His sons, William and Harry, continue this hypnotic lineage in slightly modernized forms. William's balance of ceremonial duty and private interests, particularly his aviation hobbies and family routines, reflects the centuries-old rhythm of aristocracy. Harry, navigating both public scrutiny and personal pursuits, demonstrates that even modern royals cannot escape the subtle pressures, minor scandals, and quiet eccentricities that have always followed aristocratic families like shadows. Across Europe, similar patterns persist. In Spain, Felipe VI and Queen Letizia continue to embody the gentle tension between duty and personal life. Felipe quietly manages ceremonial obligations while indulging in hobbies, while Letizia balances public scrutiny with private passions. Their children inherit not only status, but also subtle pressures, minor quirks, and the faint rhythm of carefully orchestrated family life that has echoed for generations. Scandinavia, with King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden and Queen Sylvia, offers another example of continuity. Their decades-long reign has been punctuated by minor personal oddities, private family routines, and occasional public mishaps. Crown Princess Victoria and her siblings carry forward this pattern, blending ceremonial expectation with personal quirks, private anxieties, and the gentle rhythm of aristocratic life. The hypnotic flow of these centuries-old patterns continues like soft water over mossy stones. In the Netherlands, King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima balance ceremonial duties with personal interests and family management. Their children inherit both privileges and pressures, minor personal eccentricities, and small domestic misadventures. Even in small gestures, photographs, public appearances, carefully crafted statements, one can detect the subtle repetition of centuries of aristocratic rhythm, quietly mesmerizing and strangely calming. And meanwhile, in Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg, the pattern continues unbroken. Prince Albert II and his extended family maintain careful routines, subtle personal quirks, and minor domestic dramas, all observed with polite discretion by the public and quietly recorded by the forest of history.
Grand Duke Henri of Luxembourg similarly blends ceremonial life with private interests, minor anxieties, and gentle eccentricities that echo through the centuries. Even when modern technology accelerates life around them, royals continue to follow these timeless rhythms. Minor scandals, subtle anxieties, delicate health concerns, and the occasional awkward family gathering persist in every generation, carried forward as quietly as leaves drifting down a forest stream. The hypnotic cadence remains, measured daily routines, personal quirks, private worries, and polite ceremonial repetition. And as we pause for a moment, the forest seems to lean closer, listening to these subtle rhythms. Every sigh, every quiet misstep, every delicate eccentricity becomes part of a continuous symphony, history's gentle, sleep-inducing lullaby. No loud declarations, no dramatic revolutions, just centuries of human peculiarity flowing slowly, patiently, and mesmerizingly through time. As the branches sway above and the moss cushions our steps, notice how this rhythm, unchanged across centuries, creates a hypnotic calm. From powdered wigs to modern suits, from ancient palaces to contemporary estates, the continuous cadence of aristocratic life unfolds softly before us, subtle, measured, and endlessly fascinating in its quiet repetition.
Modern palaces and soft whispers. As we move deeper into the 21st century, imagine the hushed corridors of modern palaces, polished floors reflecting soft light, muted conversations drifting through hallways, and the occasional subtle laughter echoing faintly behind closed doors. Technology buzzes quietly in the background, yet the timeless rhythm of royal life remains hypnotically steady. Personal quirks, delicate anxieties, and minor domestic dramas continue to shape the lives of the privileged, all wrapped in centuries of protocol. In Britain, King Charles III navigates his early reign with the calm, deliberate pace that has long characterized this lineage. His personal habits, early morning walks in private gardens, meticulous attention to letters and correspondence, and the occasional quietly sarcastic remark during family gatherings continue the centuries-old pattern of aristocratic eccentricity. Even small incidents, like misplacing a ceremonial sash or accidentally interrupting a formal speech, are absorbed into the hypnotic rhythm of palace life, quietly recorded by the forest of history. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, continue to embody a similar blend of duty and personal interest. William's fascination with aviation, Catherine's quiet dedication to hobbies such as photography and art, and the family's collective minor mishaps at public events are subtle echoes of the patterns we've observed for centuries: measured repetition, gentle eccentricity, and quiet familial negotiation. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, illustrate a slightly faster tempo in this rhythm, with subtle departures from tradition, modern media scrutiny, and private domestic decisions that have been widely observed. Yet even here, the hypnotic pattern of aristocratic life persists. Minor anxieties, small-scale scandals, and personal quirks quietly ripple through the lineage, harmonizing with centuries of precedent. Across Europe, Felipe VI and Queen Letizia of Spain maintain this soft cadence. Felipe blends ceremonial obligations with private interests, while Letizia manages media scrutiny, family expectations, and personal pursuits. Their children inherit both privilege and subtle pressures, continuing the centuries-long rhythm of minor eccentricities, polite anxieties, and careful daily routines. In Scandinavia, King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden and Queen Sylvia
continue to demonstrate the hypnotic persistence of tradition. Their children, Victoria, Carl Philip, and Madeline, carry forward subtle personal quirks, ceremonial expectations, and gentle domestic dramas. These minor eccentricities ripple softly through palace life, creating a calm, mesmerizing cadence that has endured for centuries. The Netherlands royal family, Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg all echo the same patterns: measured ceremonial duties, private personal interests, occasional domestic quirks, and minor public missteps. Even as media attention intensifies and modernity presses in, the gentle, hypnotic rhythm of aristocracy continues uninterrupted. The forest above seems to nod in recognition, whispering every sigh, minor scandal, and delicate habit into the soft, mossy memory of history. From ancient palaces to contemporary estates, the essence of royal life remains quietly consistent. Subtle human eccentricities, polite anxieties, minor domestic dramas, and the endless hypnotic cadence of daily routine. No loud battles, no dramatic upheavals, just centuries of continuous repetition, gently flowing forward like a slow river through the forest of time. As your eyelids grow heavier and the soft light of history surrounds you, notice how these whispered rhythms, minor personal quirks, delicate health concerns, and quietly unfolding domestic dramas create a mesmerizing lullaby. The forest listens, recording every subtle sigh and gentle eccentricity, carrying them forward as soft echoes of centuries past.
Soft echoes of contemporary thrones. As we drift further into modern times, imagine the hushed rustle of newspapers, the quiet tap of keyboards, and the muted clicks of cameras in palace corridors. Royals today navigate a slightly faster world, yet the centuries-old rhythm remains. Minor eccentricities, subtle anxieties, and delicate domestic dramas continue, quietly mesmerizing in their repetition. In Britain, King Charles III continues the centuries-old pattern with calm persistence. His daily routines, early morning walks, careful correspondence, and private reflections carry forward a rhythm observed for generations. Even the faintly awkward moments, such as misplacing ceremonial items or gently stumbling through a speech, become part of a hypnotic pattern that echoes the quiet, measured pace of monarchy. William and Catherine, Prince and Princess of Wales, maintain a similar cadence. Public appearances, official engagements, and private family moments unfold in a gentle rhythm, punctuated by small eccentricities. William's aviation hobby, Catherine's artistic pursuits, and the soft missteps or private frustrations of family life, all carefully managed under centuries of expectation. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, introduce a slightly faster tempo, blending public scrutiny, media attention, and private choices. Even here, the hypnotic pattern persists. Subtle family tensions, minor public controversies, and personal quirks weave quietly into the ongoing cadence of aristocracy, demonstrating that centuries-old patterns adapt rather than disappear. Across Europe, Felipe VI and Queen Letizia continue the gentle rhythm of monarchy. Felipe balances ceremonial obligations with personal interests, while Letizia navigates media attention, family expectations, and quiet domestic routines. Their children, inheriting privilege and responsibility, carry forward centuries of subtle eccentricities, polite anxieties, and measured domestic rituals. In Scandinavia, King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden and Queen Sylvia maintain the hypnotic rhythm of courtly life. Their children, Victoria, Carl Philip, and Madeline, blend ceremonial duties with private hobbies, minor eccentricities,
and quiet personal concerns. These subtle traits ripple softly through palace life, maintaining the centuries-old cadence of aristocratic existence. The Netherlands, Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg all exhibit similar patterns. Royals in these nations balance ceremonial responsibilities with personal interests, occasional minor scandals, and subtle domestic dramas. Even under the glare of modern media, the hypnotic cadence of aristocracy persists. Measured repetition, quiet quirks, and gentle endurance of centuries-old routines. Interestingly, in the modern era, small eccentricities have taken on new forms. Royals may cultivate hobbies like photography, aviation, marine conservation, or private writing. Minor controversies over fashion, remarks, or personal choices play out quietly in the media but rarely disrupt the underlying rhythm. Health concerns, domestic tensions, and the ongoing pressure to appear perfect continue to generate the hypnotic, sleep-inducing pattern we've observed across centuries. And so, as we drift further, the forest above whispers softly, carrying every sigh, every minor domestic misadventure, and every private eccentricity forward. The hypnotic rhythm of history remains unchanged. Subtle quirks, polite anxieties, and gentle routines, all flowing forward like a slow, meandering river through time. The essence of monarchy, past or present, is revealed in these quiet patterns, not in explosions or battles, but in measured routines, soft domestic dramas, subtle eccentricities, and patient endurance of centuries-old routines. The forest listens, recording these whispers as it has for centuries, preserving them in a gentle, hypnotic lullaby that continues to soothe and mesmerize.
Subtle controversies and gentle rituals. As we move deeper into the present, imagine the soft echo of conversations behind palace doors, the faint clinking of fine china during quiet afternoon teas, and the occasional muted laughter that drifts through stately corridors. Even in the modern world, the centuries-old rhythm of royal life persists. Minor eccentricities, subtle controversies, and delicate domestic rituals continue to shape the lives of the privileged in quietly mesmerizing ways. In Britain, King Charles III's reign continues this hypnotic cadence. His life is a mixture of ceremonial duties, private routines, and gentle personal quirks. Early morning walks in royal gardens, meticulous correspondence, and quiet reflection create a rhythm that soothes and mesmerizes. Even small mishaps, misplacing an official document, a slightly awkward handshake during a public engagement, blend seamlessly into this centuries-old pattern, becoming part of the soft, continuous flow of history. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, embody a similar balance of duty and private life. William's fascination with aviation, Catherine's dedication to photography and art, and the family's quiet domestic routines all form part of this hypnotic rhythm. Occasionally, minor public missteps or slightly awkward social moments add a faintly humorous undertone, echoing centuries of aristocratic eccentricities. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, continue to demonstrate that modern royals can introduce new tempos into this rhythm. Their choices, including media interactions, private residences abroad, and personal initiatives, create subtle ripples in the long, measured flow of royal life. Even here, the pattern persists. Minor controversies, private anxieties, and personal quirks quietly join the centuries-long sequence of aristocratic rhythm. Across Europe, Felipe VI and Queen Letizia maintain the hypnotic cadence of monarchy. Felipe blends ceremonial obligations with private interests, while Leticia navigates media scrutiny, family expectations, and personal hobbies. Their children inherit both privilege and subtle pressures, carrying forward centuries of gentle eccentricities, polite anxieties, and carefully managed domestic routines. In Scandinavia, King Carl XVI Gustav of Sweden and Queen Sylvia continued to weave subtle eccentricities into their daily lives. Their children, Crown Princess Victoria, Prince Carl Philip, and Princess Madeline, carry forward the soft patterns of aristocratic life. Minor missteps, personal hobbies, and quiet domestic dramas all unfolding in the hypnotic rhythm of centuries-old expectation. The Netherlands, Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg mirror this gentle continuity. Royals in these nations balance ceremonial duties with private interests, small public controversies, and minor domestic peculiarities. Even under modern scrutiny, the hypnotic cadence of aristocracy persists. Measured repetition, private eccentricities, and polite anxieties flowing seamlessly through the decades. Interestingly, modern media has shifted the nature of minor scandals, yet the rhythm remains soothingly consistent. Fashion faux pas, awkward public gestures, or discreet domestic tensions are recorded and whispered about, but rarely disrupt the hypnotic flow. Private hobbies, photography, sailing, art, aviation, intertwine with ceremonial duty to maintain a steady, mesmerizing rhythm of life. And so, as you drift further, imagine the forest above rustling softly, the moss beneath your steps cushioning. Every sigh, every minor domestic misadventure, and every subtle eccentricity becomes part of a continuous hypnotic symphony. The essence of aristocracy, quiet persistence, gentle repetition, and human peculiarity remains unchanged, softly echoing across centuries. The branches sway, the leaves whisper, and the gentle rhythm of monarchy continues, a timeless lullaby for those willing to listen.
Whispers of duty and private peculiarities. As the forest of history stretches onward, imagine the soft echo of distant conversations, the quiet shuffle of slippers across palace floors, and the faint tap of pens on official documents. Even in a modern era, the centuries-old rhythm of royal life persists. Minor eccentricities, subtle controversies, and delicate domestic rituals quietly shape the lives of those born into privilege. In Britain, King Charles III continues his gentle navigation of ceremonial duties and private routines, morning walks through palace gardens, careful attention to correspondence, and quietly managing family affairs reflect centuries of aristocratic rhythm. Even minor slip-ups, a slightly awkward handshake during a public engagement, or a small mix-up in ceremonial order, flow seamlessly into this soft, hypnotic cadence. The forest seems to lean closer, recording each subtle gesture and sigh with quiet patience. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, maintain this delicate balance of public duty and private life. William's fascination with aviation and Catherine's artistic pursuits, alongside the soft dynamics of raising their children, create a gentle, continuous rhythm. Occasionally, minor missteps, perhaps a slightly awkward public appearance or a misplaced ceremonial note, add quiet amusement to the hypnotic flow, echoing centuries of aristocratic subtlety. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, continue the pattern in a slightly more modern tempo.
Media attention, personal choices, and private initiatives ripple softly across the centuries-long sequence of aristocratic life. Even their minor controversies, private anxieties, and personal quirks become part of the hypnotic rhythm, showing that tradition can quietly adapt without breaking. Across Europe, Felipe VI and Queen Letizia continue the gentle cadence of monarchy. Felipe manages ceremonial obligations while indulging in personal hobbies, and Letizia carefully balances media scrutiny with family management. Their children inherit not only privilege, but subtle pressures and minor eccentricities, continuing the centuries-long lullaby of polite anxieties and domestic rhythms. In Scandinavia, King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden and Queen Sylvia persist in the hypnotic tradition of soft routines, minor eccentricities, and careful domestic management. Their children, Crown Princess Victoria, Prince Carl Philip, and Princess Madeline, inherit subtle quirks, ceremonial expectations, and the gentle rhythm of aristocratic life. Small missteps, private disagreements, and minor public faux pas ripple softly through palace corridors, blending into the long, calm flow of history. Interestingly, the modern era introduces new gentle quirks, royals embracing hobbies like photography, conservation, writing, or sailing. Even seemingly trivial incidents, an awkward public gesture, a misreported remark, or a private family disagreement, fit neatly into the continuous hypnotic flow. The forest listens, recording every subtle sigh and faintly humorous misstep, preserving centuries of aristocratic rhythm in quiet, unbroken continuity. And so, as the branches above sway and the moss cushions our passage, notice how these soft patterns persist. Every minor scandal, every personal quirk, and every polite anxiety blends into a hypnotic melody, a gentle lullaby of human eccentricity, privilege, and endurance. History's forest whispers softly, carrying these stories forward, unhurried and endlessly mesmerizing.
Subtle scandals and quiet reflections. As the forest of history envelops us, imagine the faint sound of pages turning in private studies, the soft rustle of gowns and suits along palace corridors, and the gentle hum of conversations carried out in hushed tones. Even in the modern world, the centuries-old rhythm of royal life continues. Minor scandals, delicate domestic dramas, and quiet personal eccentricities form a hypnotic cadence that soothes as much as it fascinates. In Britain, King Charles III maintains this gentle flow of ceremonial duty and private routine. Early mornings in palace gardens, meticulous attention to letters, and subtle domestic management create a slow, continuous rhythm. Minor incidents, a misplaced ceremonial order, a faintly awkward greeting during a public engagement, simply become part of the hypnotic pattern, observed quietly by those who walk the corridors and, metaphorically, by the forest itself. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, continue this pattern. Their public appearances, family life, and minor social missteps blend seamlessly with centuries of tradition. William's interest in aviation, Catherine's artistic hobbies, and the quiet rhythms of raising children create a gentle, continuous cadence. Occasionally, a small faux pas or minor domestic disagreement provides a faint ripple in the otherwise calm flow, reminding us that subtle human eccentricities persist even at the highest levels of society. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, offer a slightly more modern variation. Their choices, balancing public scrutiny, private initiatives, and personal pursuits, introduce gentle ripples into the long hypnotic sequence of royal life. Minor controversies, subtle tensions, and personal quirks blend with centuries of tradition, showing how aristocratic rhythms adapt without losing their timeless cadence. Across Europe, Felipe VI and Queen Letizia of Spain continue the hypnotic pattern of monarchy. Felipe balances ceremonial obligations with personal hobbies, while Letizia navigates media attention, family life, and private interests. Their children inherit not only privilege, but also subtle pressures, minor eccentricities, and delicate domestic concerns, continuing the centuries-long rhythm of polite anxieties and gentle repetition. In Scandinavia, King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden and Queen Sylvia maintain soft, continuous patterns of life. Their children, Crown Princess Victoria, Prince Carl Philip, and Princess Madalena, blend ceremonial duty with private hobbies, minor public faux pas, and quiet domestic management. Small incidents ripple through the palace, unnoticed by the wider world, yet forming part of the hypnotic, centuries-old cadence of aristocracy. The Netherlands, Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg echo this same rhythm. Royals balance ceremonial duties, personal interests, occasional minor scandals, and private domestic quirks. Even modern media scrutiny cannot disrupt the underlying hypnotic flow of aristocratic life. Repetition, gentle eccentricities, and subtle anxieties move forward like a calm stream through centuries of tradition. Interestingly, the modern era adds a few new, gentle quirks. Royals engage in hobbies like photography, conservation, writing, and travel. Minor incidents, a misreported remark, an awkward public gesture, or a quietly observed domestic disagreement blend seamlessly into the continuous, soothing rhythm. The forest above whispers softly, recording each sigh, each misstep, and each delicate eccentricity, preserving centuries of aristocratic continuity with patient grace. And so, as we drift further, notice how the hypnotic rhythm of monarchy continues. Subtle human quirks, minor controversies, gentle routines, and quiet domestic dramas all create a soft lullaby of history. The moss cushions each step, the branches sway above, and every whispered story, no matter how small, becomes part of an unbroken, mesmerizing flow that stretches across centuries.
The gentle persistence of royal life. As the forest of history wraps around us like a soft blanket, imagine quiet palace corridors, the muted shuffle of footsteps across polished floors, and the gentle murmur of conversations that never rise above a whisper. Even in our modern era, the centuries-old cadence of aristocratic life continues. Subtle eccentricities, minor controversies, and private domestic rhythms carry forward in a hypnotic, soothing flow. In Britain, King Charles III's daily life continues this gentle rhythm. Early mornings in private gardens, meticulously reviewed correspondence, and quiet attention to family matters shape the soft tempo of his reign. Even small mishaps, a misplaced ceremonial item, a slightly awkward handshake during a public event, become part of the hypnotic pattern that has endured for generations. The forest metaphorically listens, recording each sigh, each minor misstep, and every delicate eccentricity. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, continue the centuries-old pattern of aristocratic life. William's aviation hobbies, Catherine's artistic pursuits, and the quiet management of their children's upbringing all contribute to the hypnotic cadence of his reign. Small public missteps or minor domestic disputes occasionally ripple through the routine, adding subtle texture without disturbing the continuous, soothing flow. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, maintain a slightly different tempo. Their choices, blending media scrutiny, personal initiatives, and private domestic life, ripple gently across the centuries-old sequence of aristocratic rhythm. Minor controversies, personal quirks, and subtle family tensions fold seamlessly into the hypnotic flow of history. Across Europe, Felipe VI and Queen Letizia of Spain continued to exemplify the gentle persistence of monarchy. Felipe balances ceremonial duties with personal interests, while Letizia navigates media attention, family life, and private routines. Their children inherit subtle pressures, minor eccentricities, and delicate domestic rhythms, continuing a centuries-long lullaby of polite anxieties and quiet repetition. In Scandinavia, King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden and Queen Sylvia maintain soft, continuous patterns of life. Their children, Crown Princess Victoria, Prince Carl Philip, and Princess Madeleine, blend ceremonial duties with personal hobbies, minor public faux pas, and quiet domestic management. Small incidents ripple softly through the palace, adding texture to the hypnotic cadence without disturbing the overall calm. The Netherlands, Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg all reflect this same persistent rhythm. Royals balance ceremonial duties, personal hobbies, occasional minor scandals, and domestic quirks. Even modern media scrutiny cannot disrupt the underlying flow. Repetition, gentle eccentricities, and polite anxieties persist like a calm stream flowing through centuries of tradition. The modern era introduces new gentle quirks: photography, travel, environmental advocacy, private writings, and other personal hobbies. Minor missteps, awkward gestures, misreported remarks, and small domestic disputes fit neatly into the hypnotic pattern. The forest above whispers softly, recording these subtle moments and carrying them forward as part of a continuous, soothing lullaby of aristocratic life. And so, as we drift further along the quiet, moss-lined path of history, notice the hypnotic persistence of these patterns. Every minor scandal, every personal eccentricity, every subtle domestic ritual flows into the continuous rhythm of monarchy, creating a soft, mesmerizing lullaby. From ancient palaces to modern estates, the essence of aristocracy, quiet persistence, gentle repetition, and human peculiarities remains unchanged, endlessly soothing and quietly fascinating.
The endless lullaby of aristocracy. As we arrive at the final stretch of our journey through centuries of whispered history, imagine the forest around us, moss thick and soft beneath our feet, leaves swaying in a gentle, timeless breeze, and distant birdsong mingling with the faint hum of palace life. Here, the hypnotic rhythm of aristocracy reaches its quiet culmination, a continuous, gentle melody that spans centuries and continents. In Britain, the modern royal family embodies this unbroken cadence. King Charles III, with his carefully measured routines, minor eccentricities, and private reflections, continues the centuries-old pattern of subtle human quirks. William and Catherine, with their family life and private hobbies, maintain the delicate balance of duty and personal rhythm. Harry and Meghan, in their more modern tempo, demonstrate that even departures from tradition flow naturally into the hypnotic current of history. In Europe,
Felipe VI and Queen Letizia of Spain continue the soft persistence of monarchy. Their children inherit subtle pressures, minor domestic quirks, and gentle anxieties, adding new layers to a centuries-old lullaby of aristocratic life. In Scandinavia, King Carl XVI Gustaf and Queen Sylvia, along with their children, demonstrate the continuity of soft, measured eccentricities, private routines, and polite domestic dramas. The Netherlands, Monaco, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg echo these same patterns: measured ceremonial duties, quiet personal interests, minor scandals, and domestic quirks flowing together in a seamless rhythm. Modern media attention, technology, and global scrutiny add faint ripples, but do not disturb the continuous flow of aristocratic life. Even small incidents, awkward gestures, misreported remarks, private disagreements blend naturally into the centuries-long melody of aristocratic life. Throughout all these generations, the hypnotic cadence remains consistent. Subtle human peculiarities, quiet domestic dramas, minor anxieties, and measured repetition. The forest listens, recording every sigh, every small misstep, and every private eccentricity. From powdered wigs to tailored suits, from ancient palaces to contemporary estates, the continuous rhythm of aristocratic life persists soothingly, endlessly, and quietly mesmerizing. And as your eyelids grow heavy and the gentle rhythm of history carries you along, notice the soft, hypnotic patterns, the quiet endurance of centuries, the measured repetition of domestic routines, the minor scandals that ripple softly but never break the flow, and the endlessly fascinating human quirks that make each generation of royals both extraordinary and quietly human. The branches sway above, the moss cushions each step, and the forest seems to hum with the gentle echoes of aristocratic life. Every whispered story, every small eccentricity, and every subtle domestic drama joins in a soft, continuous lullaby, a perfect blend of history, humanity, and hypnotic rhythm. And so, with the forest as our witness and the centuries as our guide, we close this gentle journey. From ancient whispers to modern corridors, from powdered wigs to digital cameras, the hypnotic cadence of aristocratic life continues unbroken, endlessly soothing, quietly fascinating, and eternally patient. Sleep now. Let the soft rhythm of history carry you further and allow the quiet persistence of human eccentricity to lull you into gentle dreams. The forest remembers, the moss cushions, and the whisper of centuries guides you softly onward.